Everyone is always curious about what goes on behind the scenes when police question suspects. You might have wondered what happens when the line between justice and cruelty blurs during an interrogation. Do you have the courage to witness the dark side of humanity? Join us as we reveal some of the most shocking interrogation moments that will leave you utterly speechless and questioning the very essence of justice. Make sure you watch this video to the end, because the first moment on our list will blow your mind. Number 6. Thomas Robinson. In one of the most harrowing interrogation room moments, Thomas Robinson, a 27-year-old facing a potential life sentence for shooting a 17-year-old boy, devised a dangerous plan to escape custody. As the police officer moved to handcuff him, Thomas noticed the gun holster on the officer's waist, sparking a desperate idea that could end in a fatal outcome for both him and the officer. With a leap, Thomas attempted to grab the officer's gun, hoping to gain control and potentially use it to his advantage. However, due to safety features built into the holster, he was unable to retrieve the weapon. A struggle ensued, and 2 additional officers rushed into the room, armed with tasers to subdue him. Eventually, Thomas was restrained without further incident. While initially appearing as a typical case of a suspect attempting to flee custody, a closer listen to the commotion reveals something far more chilling. Amidst the struggle, Thomas repeatedly uttered the words, "Kill me," suggesting that his motivation may have been more than just escaping consequences. It is possible that Thomas, overwhelmed by fear of his impending sentence and the dire situation he found himself in, made the desperate move to terrify the officers, hoping they would shoot him and spare him from what he believed to be an even worse fate. Number 5. Ryan Waller. In another shocking incident, Ryan Waller, an 18-year-old who had survived a gunshot wound to the head, endured a nightmarish interrogation session while still suffering from critical injuries. The events leading up to Ryan's interrogation were horrific. On the 23rd of December 2006, 2 men broke into his house seeking revenge for a past argument. Ryan, hearing the noise at the door, went to investigate, only to be shot twice in the eye. The assailants then proceeded to enter his house and fatally shoot Ryan's girlfriend, Heather. Despite the gravity of his injuries, Ryan managed to survive and was able to communicate with the police when they arrived at the scene hours later. Instead of receiving immediate medical attention, Ryan was taken to the police station and subjected to a grueling hour-long interrogation. Handcuffed to a desk and in excruciating pain, he squirmed in agony for 20 minutes before the detectives even entered the room. The manner in which the detective addressed Ryan during the interrogation hinted at his awareness that something was amiss. His tone shifted, raising his voice slightly, speaking in simplified language akin to that used with a child. Yet, despite the visible injuries and Ryan's disjointed responses, the detective failed to make the necessary connections or provide medical assistance. The interrogation began with basic questions about Ryan's education, but his desperate pleas to go home and his increasing distress were met with dismissive responses. It became apparent that the detective had no grasp of the severity of Ryan's condition. Ryan's traumatic brain injury was evident, given his inability to recall events clearly, but the detective pushed forward, ignoring the signs of physical distress and trauma. Throughout the interrogation, Ryan struggled to answer questions and provide coherent information. He mentioned names related to the incident, such as Richie and Larry, and recounted the events, even with the revolver bullets still lodged in his brain. The detective, however, seemed incredulous, almost mocking Ryan's account. Despite Ryan's obvious suffering and the information he shared, the detective failed to connect the dots or recognize the urgency of his condition. Eventually, the detective revealed to Ryan that Heather, his girlfriend, was dead. This revelation seemed to surprise Ryan, indicating his compromised state of consciousness. The detective's relentless pursuit of information, despite Ryan's obvious physical and mental distress, reaches a point where he demands Ryan to tell the truth. The interrogation ended only when the detective decided to call for an ambulance, realizing that medical attention was long overdue. Upon examination at the hospital, doctors immediately recognized the critical nature of Ryan's injuries. It was confirmed that he had indeed been shot in the eye, and they also discovered an infection that could have been prevented with timely medical intervention. Ryan spent 35 days in the hospital, but the damage was irreparable. He lost part of his brain and his left eye, and his life was plagued by regular seizures until his passing in 2016. Richie and Larry, the perpetrators of the attack, received life sentences without the possibility of parole for their crimes. Ryan's father pursued legal action against the police department, but the resulting punishment for the officers involved was widely criticized as inadequate, with one receiving less than 3 years in prison. Many argued that the detective should have been held accountable for negligence and potentially even charged with manslaughter or murder. Number 4. Duran Reed. Duran Reed, a man facing up to 30 years in prison, found himself in a chilling interrogation room after attacking a police officer. His disturbing intentions became evident during the questioning. Reed openly admitted his plan to lure a child out, drug her with candy laced with tranquilizers, and then abduct her while she was unconscious. The officers were stunned by his candidness, but little did they know that Reed's unsettling revelations were not the end of their encounter. As the interrogation progressed, Reed's demeanor suddenly shifted. Seizing what he believed to be an opportune moment, Reed swiftly grabbed a pen and attempted to stab one of the officers. However, the officer's quick reflexes and composure enabled him to swiftly overpower Reed and restrain him. Despite Reed's attempt to escape, it was evident that a pen was not the most effective weapon, and his bid for freedom ended in failure. Reed's escape plan only added to his mounting charges. In addition to the initial attack on the police officer, he was now facing attempted kidnapping and a felony count of assault. With these charges against him, Reed was left to await trial, aware that he could potentially spend the next 3 decades behind bars. His escape attempt had only worsened his situation, reinforcing the severity of his alleged crimes. I hope you are still here and are also as surprised that these things so happen in real life. So in these cases, you see that it is very bad what a police officer can go through behind the scenes that we are never aware of. But stay tuned, because one is a situation that is really stunning and actually makes your mouth drop open. Number 3. Quantrell. Quantrell D. Schwartzlow, a 17-year-old, found himself in custody at the Rock County Sheriff's Office in October of 2018. He had been taken into custody during the execution of a search warrant at a location on W. Beloit Street in Orfordville. The authorities had brought him in for a custodial interview. While in the interview room, Quantrell saw an opportunity to escape. He made a daring decision and jumped through the window of the second-story room. The fall from the window was estimated to be between 12 to 16 feet. Despite the impact, he managed to get up and quickly flee from the scene. Upon realizing that Quantrell had escaped, the Rock County Sheriff's Office immediately initiated a search in the surrounding area. It took several hours, but the Janesville police officers eventually located and apprehended him in the 700 block of Yuba Street in Janesville. Quantrell was later charged with 2 felonies: escape criminal arrest and strangulation and suffocation. In December 2018, he pleaded not guilty to these charges. To prevent similar incidents in the future, the Rock County Sheriff's Office took measures to enhance security by installing metal grates on the windows of the interview room, ensuring that others would not be able to escape in the same manner. Now, if you think Quantrell's escape was a strange incident, wait for number 1, because the number 1 case on our list will leave you truly perplexed. Keep watching. Number 2. Ricky Hathorn. Ricky Hathorn's case unfolded in a grim and bloody scene. He was discovered near the lifeless bodies of Lara Kuchar and Tommy Skeens, with evidence linking him to the brutal assault. When Ricky was brought in for interrogation, the police had little doubt about his involvement in the crime. The weight of the evidence against him seemed insurmountable, but Ricky would soon make the investigation even easier for the authorities. As the interrogation began, Ricky surprised the officers with his rapid confession. He admitted to assaulting Lara and acknowledged his presence at the crime scene. However, Ricky claimed that he was not the actual murderer. He alleged that someone else had arrived after his assault and finished the job, emphasizing that he had left the victims alive when he departed. Despite his claims, the evidence painted a different picture. The investigation determined that Lara and Tommy had succumbed to the injuries inflicted by Ricky. Forensic evidence pointed directly at him, leaving little room for doubt. The police were convinced that Ricky's confession, despite his attempt to distance himself from the murders, revealed his guilt. He was subsequently charged with first and second-degree murder, as well as the attack on Lara. Number 1. Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, both 16 years old, found themselves at the center of one of the most horrifying murder cases in history. Their classmate, Cassie Stoddart, had been brutally stabbed over 30 times in her own home. The police, determined to unravel the truth, brought in Brian and Tori for questioning. Little did the two suspects know that their stories would be systematically dismantled in an intense and satisfying interrogation. The detectives handling the case employed a strategic approach, bringing in each suspect individually to create a comfortable atmosphere conducive to extracting information. They reminded Brian and Tori that they were not under arrest and could leave at any time, aiming to lower their guard and encourage cooperation. However, beneath the seemingly casual conversation, the detectives were meticulously building their case. During the interrogations, the detectives focused on establishing a timeline of events, asking about the night of the murder, Cassie's house, and their activities. Brian and Tori had initially provided identical alibis, claiming they had gone to a nearby movie theater and stayed there for the duration of the evening. However, the detectives found inconsistencies in their accounts, particularly regarding the movie they claimed to have watched. Suspecting that Brian and Tori were not telling the truth, the detectives intensified their questioning, honing in on specific details. They probed about the movie's plot, characters, and memorable moments, only to be met with vague and evasive responses. It became evident that the suspects had not watched the movie as they had claimed, raising further doubts about their alibis. The detectives skillfully exploited the inconsistencies between Brian and Tori's stories, employing a technique known as the two suspects, one lie strategy. By confronting each suspect with discrepancies in the other's account, the detectives forced them to confront their own lies. The pressure mounted, and eventually Brian broke under the weight of the evidence, confessing to the murder. So which interrogation was extreme and shocking? Tell us in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.